So I think AI is no different from other technology from that point of view, is that it'll pose new challenges that humanity has to collectively be aware of and solve. It'll also create opportunities we've never thought of.
Hi everybody, Ian Bremmer here, and I've got your GZero world. I'm in front of New York Public Library, that wonderful, august institution of higher learning. Pretty good time to be talking to Feifei Li. She is in charge of artificial intelligence and machine learning at Google Cloud. And yes, I have your puppet regime. Today, Vladimir Putin finally takes responsibility for everything in the United States. Let's start with your world this week. Jerusalem. We weren't talking about that last week, but when Trump was running for the presidency, one of his campaign promises was that he was going to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and he's going to move the American embassy there. He's now made that announcement, first country to do so, and clearly there's going to be enormous amounts of pushback from across the Muslim world. Jerusalem is one of the most important holy sites for Muslims everywhere, and it's also critical for the Palestinian-Israeli peace plan, such as it is. If Trump and Jared Kushner had wanted to push forward on a peace plan, and they've talked about that, it is, I promise you, a dead letter now. There will be violence as a consequence of this, certainly demonstrations, but it's actually not as big of a deal as it might have been 5, 10, 20 years ago. And the reason for that is because it's just not a top priority across the Middle East. If you go and talk to Arab leaders, North African leaders, the rest, and say, what is highest priority for you right now? They don't say Israel-Palestine like they used to. They say ISIS, they say Al-Qaeda, they say Yemen, they say Syria, they say all of these issues that are falling apart. Iran, most importantly for many, in the region, Israel-Palestine just not reaching that top agenda for them. And that means that if you are Trump and you wanted to give something to your base, this actually isn't the worst time to do it. Probably a good thing that Jared Kushner won't be as busy with the Israel-Palestinian peace process going forward, because he's going to be plenty busy with the Mueller investigation. The big news, the big shoe to drop, is that former National Security Advisor to President Trump, Mike Flynn, has pleaded guilty to a single charge of lying to the FBI. It's not a very big charge, and that's because he is cooperating with the Mueller investigation. Clearly, they had a lot more to go on against him, but also he had a lot to offer. Now, what might that be, given how senior he is? We're talking about Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. We're talking about the president himself. Let's keep in mind that Flynn was the lead foreign policy advisor during the transition, as well as during the campaign. He reported to Jared Kushner. So this investigation is going to circle very closely on the absolute top levels. That's bad news for the administration. One piece of good news is that a senior investigator was let go abruptly when it was found out that he was actually privately texting very negative things and his views about President Trump. Not a good look for the investigation. And if you are President Trump, clearly you want to portray this investigation as a witch hunt. The people that are watching the news on the investigation that support Trump, watching very different kinds of news than those that want to see Trump go down. This is definitely something that Trump is going to be able to make a meal of as the investigation proceeds. And finally, artificial intelligence. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that whoever controls AI controls the world. It's a funny thing because it's certainly not going to be Vladimir Putin. Look, the United Kingdom, Canada are doing reasonably well, but ultimately this is a race between really two contestants. It's the United States and it's China, but they're very different contestants indeed. It's China, it's Xi Jinping saying that by 2030, the state is going to ensure that the Chinese are winning AI. In the United States, it's not the government at all. It's Silicon Valley. It's a bunch of really wealthy entrepreneurs competing not only with China, but with each other to actually have the breakthrough technology. It's a really important race in the sense that right now there are two very different approaches. If you ask me who's going to win, the Chinese look attractive if you think AI is like the Manhattan Project. You take a whole bunch of talent, you throw it at the best computing power, and you just build until you get there. If you think it's more like responding to climate change, a whole bunch of experiments, some of which work, some of which are dead ends, then the American approach is probably more successful. But perhaps the most interesting thing is the race for talent in all of this. And right now, the majority of the world's top specialists in AI, actually even the Chinese, want to live in the United States. They don't want to live in China. But in 10 and 15 and 20 years, ask me more about what's immigration policy going to look like in America, how welcoming the Americans look, how clean is the air and the water and the quality of life in China, where do they want to live? Ultimately, this is the most important strategic battle in the world right now, and we're just starting to fight it. Speaking of AI, your big interview this week is with Feifei Li. She's head of artificial intelligence and machine learning at Google Cloud. But first, puppet regime.
Hi there, folks. Ian Bremmer here, and I'm with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Let's get started. Mr. Putin, I have to ask you, how pissed off are you right now at Donald Trump?
I am not pissed off at all. Why do you ask?
Well, sanctions against Russia haven't been lifted. Trump can't seem to get anything done for you despite his promises, and this Russian election investigation could totally unravel American politics.
Yes. Where is bad part? America divided. America unraveled. There is old proverb, Ian. What is good for Russian is death for German. I have remix. What is bad for America is great for Putin.
Well, you certainly are the center of attention in the United States these days. But does that bother you, or do you love it? I mean, be honest, Vlad. Come on. You love it a little bit, don't you? A little bit?
Why do you make me to blush on television, Ian? Why?
Come on.
Blush. But it's okay. It's true. It's true. I am greatest American boogeyman today.
You notice some dude keeps leaving the toilet seat up on the bathroom?
I know, it's so annoying.
Train is 1 hour late. You know who to blame. Trouble with internet in office is from Russia with love. Decline of working class, social polarization in America. This was also all my fault, da? To be blamed for everything, Ian, is to be blamed for nothing. I am superpower of both.
Okay, then you can talk to me about that. That'll be just fine.
I am deep in the bowels of the Googleplex here in the Bay Area with Feifei Li, the director of the Stanford AI Lab and professor of computer science there, but also now chief scientist of AI and machine learning here at Google Cloud. Feifei, great to be with you.
Great to be here, Ian.
Some have a view that technology is necessarily neutral and what you put in determines what you get out. It's a multiplier. And others would say that, well, it depends on what kind of technology, how it's structured, and that will incent certain types of behaviors. I wonder if you think that society is ready for these changes.
AI is a technology that is developing rapidly. So how ready are we? It's a question mark we all have. I don't have a very informed answer. I will ask you, were we ready for nuclear technology?
I think the answer is pretty clearly no. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that when political systems are fragmented, so that we're entering a world right now where the United States is not doing a lot of global leadership, but companies, private sector companies, not really aligned with the government, including the one right here, are making these extraordinary breakthroughs. And so I wonder how Feifei thinks about whether or not this is a technology you think should be, sort of embraced and pushed as fast as humanly possible, or if actually there are real dangers around doing that.
Right, so I definitely don't think any technology should be pushed as fast as possible without thinking and without care. I've been advocating human-centered AI in terms of thinking about the type of AI technology we develop, as well as AI's human impact.
So a couple other things I want to ask you about. One is, of course, the Americans are not the only game in town when it comes to AI. There are other countries working on this, the Brits, the Canadians, but particularly the Chinese. And the Chinese government has decided that this is a moment for them to be all in state-wise on AI, massive state 2030 plan for developing AI. Were you surprised at the level of ambition? Are you impressed by what the Chinese are doing right now in the field compared to what you see in the United States?
I'm definitely impressed. So, as you know, natively, I grew up in China and got my education in America. So when I look at what my friends and colleagues are doing in China, I'm very impressed by the passion and aspiration in AI. I have many students who have come from China to study AI overseas. In international AI academic conference, we see a lot of great Chinese authors and institutions publishing good work. So I'm very impressed. I'm also very impressed by the government level support. I think I'm not that surprised because I think there's a great drive in China for the past several decades now to make technological advances. It's a country that is known to embrace technology. Look at what China did for mobile technology, for social media, for internet technology. It's really quite phenomenal.
Are there areas right now of AI where you would say definitively the Chinese are in the lead or are likely to be in the lead going forward?
I think China has room to grow in basic science research in AI. I think what China is getting really good at is where there's good use case scenario. For example, China social media like WeChat or Alibaba's.
Because it's more all immersive, they've got more data,
exactly,
more people.
Exactly. So those areas, I think China is making phenomenal progress.
Okay, final question for you, and it's kind of a big one, but it's the one that you hear so much about, which is the people that are talking the most dire expressions about the future of AI warn that this is the end of humanity, right? And I have to ask, you know, when you really are working cutting edge in this field, how much do you worry that you are actually opening Pandora's box?
So, Ian, so I have a 22-month-old child, and I look at her development, like her visual ability, her manipulation, her navigation, her speech, her emotional communication with me. And I look at today's AI algorithms, I think we are very, very, very far from creating a machine that can have, can come that close to that capability. So from a technology point of view, I think we have a long way to go to make machines that are in the realm of Hollywood's imagination. But having said that, I think the way I think about Pandora box is that whether it's AI or any technology, it could become a Pandora box. Humans have this capability of making mistakes with technology and or anything else, and we should be on the guard. We should think carefully, and we should be thoughtful. We should engage government policymakers, thought leaders. We should be doing all that.
Feifei Li, not about to be replaced by a robot.
Thank you, Ian. You too. You won't be replaced by a robot.
That's your show this week. Come back next week and you're going to see Charlie Spearing. He is the White House correspondent for Breitbart News. Hard-hitting GZero World.